A billionaire thought he could protect his daughter with wealth, until a stranger's hug taught them both the true meaning of family. Ion Malik was a man who had everything the world could offer: a towering empire, luxurious cars, expensive suits, and a life that most people could only dream of. Yet, despite all his wealth, he carried a heaviness in his heart that money could never fix. Since the tragic death of his wife 2 years ago, he had been left to raise his 6-year-old daughter, Hanny, alone. Hanny was the light of his life, but her presence also reminded him of everything he had lost. He loved her deeply, but sometimes he struggled to connect with her the way her mother had. And the guilt of not being able to fill that void weighed on him constantly. One crisp morning, Ion decided to take Hanny to a small, quiet cafe near his office. He had an important meeting later that day and had planned to grab a quick breakfast before heading to the boardroom. Hanny, with her tiny backpack and sparkling eyes, bounced with excitement. For her, every moment with her father was special, and even simple things like going to a cafe felt like an adventure. As they entered the cafe, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries filled the air. The soft murmur of conversations and the gentle clinking of cups created a cozy, welcoming atmosphere. Ion, usually absorbed in his work and business deals, tried to enjoy the moment with Hanny. He ordered their breakfast pancakes and chocolate milk for Hanny, and black coffee for himself. Hanny immediately began exploring the cafe, her tiny fingers tracing the edges of the tables, her eyes wide with curiosity at every detail. The waitress who approached them had a natural warmth that immediately put Hanny at ease. Mira was young, with soft brown eyes that carried kindness and a smile that seemed effortless. She moved gracefully, balancing trays and taking orders with genuine care. It wasn't her first day on the job, but there was something about the way she noticed small details, like the way Hanny tugged at her sleeve or glanced nervously at the menu. It showed she paid attention, really paid attention to the people she served. While Ion was distracted by his phone, checking emails and reviewing his calendar for the day, Hanny's face suddenly changed. Her small brows furrowed, and she looked toward Myra with eyes that glistened with unshed tears. In a small, trembling voice, she asked, "Can you hug me? Like a mom?" The words hit Ion like a sudden gust of cold wind. He froze, his hand hovering over the coffee cup, unsure of how to respond. Hanny's request was innocent, simple, and yet it carried the weight of longing and pain that only a child who missed her mother could feel. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, Mira knelt down to Hanny's level. She wrapped her arms around the little girl, pulling her gently into a warm, comforting hug. Hanny's body relaxed immediately, her small hands clutching Mira's shoulders, as if she had found a safe harbor in the middle of a storm. Ion watched silently. He had always tried to be strong for Hanny, to be the pillar she could lean on. But he realized in that moment that some things were beyond his power. He could provide her with everything she needed materially, yet he couldn't replace the warmth, the soft touch, the motherly love that she craved. And here was a stranger, a simple waitress, offering exactly what he felt powerless to give. He felt a mixture of emotions: surprise, confusion, and something he hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. He wanted to intervene to remind Mira that this was his daughter, that she was not supposed to be receiving this kind of affection from a stranger. Yet, at the same time, he could see how Hanny's face had lit up with comfort, how her little body, usually tense and anxious, had relaxed in Mira's arms. He realized that sometimes love and care could come from the most unexpected places. Mira held Hanny for a few moments longer, speaking softly, encouragingly, as if reassuring her that she was safe and loved. Hanny rested her head against Mira's shoulder, letting out a small sigh, a sound that made Ion's chest tighten. He had never heard his daughter sigh like that before, a sigh of pure relief and comfort. It was a simple moment, yet it felt monumental. It was a moment that reminded Ion of what he had been missing, not just for Hanny, but for himself as well. Finally, Mira gently released Hanny from the hug. Hanny clung to her for a little longer, unwilling to let go. Ion quickly intervened, picking her up in his arms, his face carefully composed to hide the emotions swirling inside him. He offered a polite apology to Mira, though he wasn't even sure what he was apologizing for. Myra simply smiled and shook her head, her expression full of understanding. "It's okay," she said softly. "She's a sweet little girl. Sometimes kids just need a hug." Ion nodded, still silent, and watched as Hanny's face lit up again with a bright, innocent smile. He realized that this small act of kindness had brought a spark of happiness to his daughter, something he hadn't been able to provide on his own in months. Hanny started talking animatedly about the pancakes, the chocolate milk, and how she wanted to visit the cafe every morning. Her laughter filled the small space, warm and melodious. And for the first time in a long while, Ion felt a small flicker of peace in his heart as they finished their breakfast. Hanny kept glancing at Mira, and Ion found himself observing the waitress more closely. He noticed the little details, the way she interacted with other customers, the patience in her movements, the genuine smile she gave to everyone she served. He couldn't explain why, but he felt a strange sense of connection forming. It's not just between Hanny and Mira, but within himself as well. It was as if a small piece of the world he thought he had lost had suddenly returned. Before leaving the cafe, Hanny looked up at Ion with hopeful eyes and asked, "Can we come back tomorrow?" Ion hesitated, unsure why his heart raced at such a simple request. But then he nodded, smiling softly, and said, "Yes, Hanny, we can come back tomorrow." And with that, they left the cafe, Ion carrying Hanny in his arms, both of them unaware that this small, ordinary morning would mark the beginning of a life-changing journey, a journey of love, healing, and unexpected connections that would slowly but surely reshape their lives forever. The next morning, Ion woke up earlier than usual. Something about the previous day's visit to the cafe lingered in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about the way Mira had comforted Hanny and how effortlessly the little girl had opened up to her. It was a strange feeling for him. He had always been a man of control, someone who handled business deals, money, and strategy with precision. But emotions, especially those of a child, had always been more difficult for him to navigate. He had spent so much time focusing on his empire that he often neglected the delicate needs of his daughter, thinking that providing for her materially was enough. But yesterday had proven him wrong. Hanny, as usual, was buzzing with energy when Ion entered her room. She had already chosen her outfit, a little pink dress with white flowers, her hair neatly tied into 2 ponytails. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she looked at her father. "Can we go to the cafe now, Papa?" she asked eagerly. Ion smiled, something soft and rare crossing his face. "Yes, Hanny, let's go," he replied. When they arrived at the cafe, Mira was already there, preparing for the morning rush. She greeted them warmly, her smile immediately putting Hanny at ease. "Good morning, Hanny." "Good morning, Mr. Malik," she said cheerfully. Hanny ran up to her and hugged her tightly, just like she had yesterday. Mira laughed softly, patting the little girl on the back. Ion took a seat nearby, observing quietly. He had promised himself he wouldn't interfere, but he found his eyes drawn to every small interaction between Mira and his daughter. He noticed the way Mira listened carefully when Hanny spoke, leaning down to meet her at eye level, nodding, and responding as if every word Hanny said truly mattered. It was a small thing, but for Hanny, it made a huge difference. As breakfast was served, Hanny chattered endlessly, telling Mira about her favorite cartoons, the new toys she wanted, and even the little incidents from her school the previous day. Mira responded with gentle questions and encouraging words, creating a safe space where Hanny could express herself without fear. Ion was struck by the contrast. He remembered how, before, Hanny often held back, unsure how to share her feelings with him. But with Mira, she seemed completely free, as though she had found someone who could understand her without judgment. After a while, Hanny leaned back in her chair and looked at Ion with a thoughtful expression. "Papa," she said softly, "can Mira stay with us forever?" Ion felt a lump in his throat. He didn't answer immediately. He watched Myra, who had been refilling Hanny's juice glass, and noticed the gentle way she smiled at the question. Mira shook her head slightly, but her eyes conveyed warmth and kindness. She whispered, "I can't live with you forever, Hanny, but I'll always be your friend." Ion realized that Mira's presence was already having a profound effect on Hanny. The child seemed happier, more confident, and even more affectionate. For the first time in a long time, Hanny laughed freely, without hesitation. Her small hands reached for everything around her, the syrup, the napkins, the fruit, and she even helped Myra carry a small tray to the next table. Ion watched all this silently, a strange mixture of awe and gratitude filling his chest. Later, as the morning rush began, Ion noticed how Myra managed everything so calmly. She served other customers, handled complaints, and still found time to check on Hanny. Ion had seen efficiency and discipline in his boardrooms, but this was different. Myra's efficiency was mixed with care, patience, and understanding. She didn't rush through her tasks. Instead, she seemed to live in the moment, making every person feel important. During a quiet moment, Mira approached Ion and spoke softly. "She's a very smart and sensitive little girl," she said. "I can see how much you love her. But she's also lonely. She misses her mother, doesn't she?" Ion didn't respond immediately. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always been aware of Hanny's loneliness, but hearing it spoken aloud made it more real, more painful. "Yes," he admitted finally, his voice low. "I try to be there for her, but I know I can't replace her mother." Ada nodded gently, understanding more in silence than words could express. "You don't have to replace anyone," she said. "Just being here, listening, loving her the way you can, is enough. Sometimes, that's all a child needs." Ion felt a wave of relief and emotion wash over him. He'd been so focused on trying to fix everything that he hadn't realized that just being present, just caring in simple ways could mean the world to Hanny. Throughout the breakfast, Hanny continued to show small signs of happiness that Ion hadn't seen in months. She helped Mira arrange napkins, laughed at her own jokes, and even shared her pancake with a small boy sitting nearby. Ion watched quietly, feeling a sense of pride and hope. He realized that the bond between his daughter and Mira was growing naturally, without force or pressure, and he couldn't help but feel grateful to Mira for offering something he couldn't, a comforting, maternal presence, even if only for a few hours each morning before leaving. Hanny hugged Mira tightly, refusing to let go. "I love you, Mira," she whispered. Mira hugged her back, her voice gentle. "I love you too, Hanny. You're very special." Ion, standing silently, felt a warmth spread through his chest. He realized that the simple act of kindness and care from Mira had brought something priceless to Hanny: joy, comfort, and a sense of security. As they stepped outside, Hanny skipped ahead, looking back at Mira and waving. "See you tomorrow," she shouted. Ion followed, walking slowly, lost in thought. He knew that this simple cafe, this young waitress, and this small act of hugging his daughter had started something profound, something that could slowly heal the loneliness and pain they had carried for so long. Ion glanced at Hanny, who was smiling brightly, and felt something shift inside him. He realized that sometimes life's most important moments were not in boardrooms or luxury offices, but in small acts of human kindness, moments that brought warmth, hope, and love to those who needed it the most. And as he held Hanny's hand, he promised himself that he would do whatever it took to protect that happiness, no matter what it required. And so, the morning ended with hope. Hanny had found a friend in Mira. Ion had witnessed the healing power of compassion, and all three of them unknowingly began a journey that would change their lives forever. Over the next few weeks, Ion found himself thinking about the little cafe more often than he had expected. It had become more than just a place to grab breakfast. It was where Hanny laughed freely, where her worries seemed lighter, and where Ion began to see her grow in ways he hadn't noticed before. He started taking her there almost every morning, and with each visit, the bond between Hanny and Mira grew stronger. Mira had a unique way of connecting with children. She didn't just smile or say kind words. She truly listened. When Hanny talked about her school, her little triumphs, or her disappointments, Myra would kneel down to her level, look her in the eyes, and respond as if every word mattered. For Hanny, this was magic. It was a magic Ion had tried to create in his own way but could never fully reach. He was a businessman, and his gestures of love were often measured and practical. A hug from him was brief, his words often clipped and precise. But Mira's care was effortless, instinctive, and it brought a light to Hanny's eyes that made Ion realize something important. Emotional connection mattered just as much as financial security. Ion began to notice small changes in Hani. She started speaking more confidently. Her laughter was brighter, and she became more adventurous and curious. She would run around the cafe, helping Mira with little tasks like wiping tables or arranging napkins, and she would beam with pride when Mira praised her. Ion watched silently from his seat, feeling a mixture of pride and amazement. For months, he had worried about Hanny's emotional well-being, unsure if he was giving her enough love or attention. Seeing her so happy and confident under Mira's gentle care eased a part of that worry. But it also sparked another feeling he hadn't expected: gratitude. One morning, as they sat eating breakfast, Ion observed Mira carefully. There was a quiet determination in her movements. She managed her tasks efficiently, serving other customers while keeping an eye on Hanny, always ready to step in if the little girl needed help. Ion noticed the subtle signs of fatigue, the slight dark circles under her eyes, the occasional weariness in her posture, but her smile never faltered. It was then he realized that Mira's kindness wasn't easy. It came from a place of strength and resilience. Later, as the cafe quieted down between the morning rush and the lunchtime crowd, Mira approached Ion while Hanny was playing nearby. "She's very bright and sensitive," Myra said softly. "I can see that she misses someone. Her mother, right?" Ion felt a pang in his chest. He had always been aware of Hani's loneliness, but hearing it said aloud made it sharper, more real. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said quietly. "She misses her mother, and I don't always know how to fill that gap." Mira's eyes were gentle, understanding. "You don't have to replace her mother," she said. "Just being here, listening, loving her the way you can, that is enough. Sometimes the simplest things, a smile, a hug, time spent together, can heal more than grand gestures." Her words resonated with Ion in a way he hadn't anticipated. He had spent years trying to control every aspect of life, thinking that wealth and security could fix everything. Now he realized that love and attention, even in small doses, were what truly mattered. Hanny, meanwhile, continued to explore and interact with Mira. She shared stories, asked questions, and even began opening up about small fears she had, like being alone at night or missing her mom on special days. Mira listened attentively, validating her feelings, offering comfort, and sometimes making gentle jokes that made Hanny giggle uncontrollably. Watching them, Ion felt a mixture of admiration and humility. Mira, a young woman with far fewer resources than he had, was giving his daughter something he struggled to provide: emotional warmth and genuine care. One day, noticed something he hadn't before. Mira was not just kind to Hanny. She was compassionate in every aspect of her life. While attending to other customers, she treated everyone with the same care, regardless of their status or attitude. She helped a struggling elderly man carry his groceries, patiently explained the menu to a nervous child, and always had a smile for everyone. It struck Ion that the woman who could bring such joy to his daughter's life had a heart that extended far beyond the cafe walls. Over time, Ion began opening up as well. One afternoon, when Hanny had gone outside to play in the small garden behind the cafe, Mira sat down across from him. She spoke softly, almost cautiously, yet with a warmth that encouraged trust. "It's hard being a parent alone," she said. "I can see it in your eyes. You love her so much, but sometimes it's exhausting, isn't it?" Ion felt a lump in his throat. Mira had seen right through him the facade of control he maintained, the pressure he put on himself to be perfect for Hanny. He nodded quietly, unable to find words at first. Then he spoke, his voice low but sincere. "It is. I try to be strong, but sometimes I feel inadequate. I want to give her everything, but I worry it's not enough." Mira reached out, placing a reassuring hand on the table. "You're doing more than you realize," she said. Love isn't about perfection. It's about presence. Being there, even when it's hard, matters more than you think. Her words struck Ion deeply. He realized that all these weeks he had been measuring his love through achievements, security, and material provision, but the truth was simpler and more profound. Just being there, truly present, was enough. During these weeks, a quiet bond began to form, not just between Hanny and Mira, but also between Ion and Mira. He started noticing her in ways he hadn't before. Her subtle gestures of kindness, her resilience, her laughter, and even the small sacrifices she made to care for others. He couldn't deny the growing respect, and perhaps something more he felt for her. And yet, he also understood that Mira's world was complicated. She had responsibilities, struggles he couldn't yet see, and a life outside the cafe that he knew little about. Hanny, for her part, thrived in this environment. She began to express herself more freely, asking questions, sharing feelings, and even showing curiosity about the world in ways she hadn't before. Ion observed all this and felt a sense of relief and hope. He knew that Mira's presence was helping shape Hanny into a confident, happy child, one who could carry joy in her heart despite the loss she had experienced as their morning visits became a routine. Ion began to realize that life could still bring unexpected joys, even amidst grief and loneliness. Myra's kindness had become a bridge between Hanny's need for maternal affection and his own longing to see his daughter happy. He started looking forward to these visits, not just for Hanny, but for himself as well. And so, over the course of those weeks, what had started as a single, unexpected hug grew into something much more significant. It became a quiet, powerful bond, one that offered healing, warmth, and a glimmer of hope. Ion watched as his daughter blossomed under Mira's gentle care. He slowly began to understand the truth. Sometimes the people who touch your heart the most are the ones you least expect. And sometimes love doesn't come in grand gestures or lavish gifts. It comes in simple moments of presence, understanding, and compassion. By the end of this period, the morning visits had transformed into a small ritual that Hanny eagerly awaited. And for Ion, it became a space where he could observe, reflect, and begin to rediscover the softer side of life, a side that he had almost forgotten amidst the pressures of business, grief, and responsibility. One afternoon, after weeks of their morning visits, Ion arrived at the cafe a little earlier than usual. Hanny was already there, bouncing excitedly on her tiny chair while Mira smiled at her, showing the same warmth and patience that had become so familiar. The cafe buzzed softly with the usual crowd, customers chatting, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, the gentle clatter of plates and cups. As Ion observed, he noticed something unusual. Mira, who usually moved confidently among the tables, suddenly looked tense. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped down a counter. Her eyes darted toward the cafe door, as if expecting someone or something. Ion frowned, a sense of concern rising within him. He had seen Mira as patient, calm, and almost unshakable in the mornings. But today something felt different. Before he could call out, Mira's expression shifted from worry to panic. She dropped the cloth she was holding and rushed out of the cafe, her steps hurried and unsteady. Hanny, confused, looked at Ion and tugged at his sleeve. "Papa, what's wrong with Mira?" "Where is she going?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. Ion felt his heart tighten. Something was clearly wrong. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He followed Mira outside and saw her running down the street, glancing back nervously. Ion's instincts kicked in. He was not just a businessman in that moment. He was a father, someone who had begun to care deeply for both Hanny and the young woman who had become so important to her. He called out her name, and when she didn't stop, he quickened his pace, determined to catch up. Finally, he reached her just as she stopped in front of a small, modest apartment building. Mira was out of breath, her face pale, and tears threatened to spill from her eyes. Ion noticed the way her hands shook as she fumbled with her keys. "Mira, what's happening?" he asked gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Myra turned to him, her eyes filled with both relief and worry. "It's my brother," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "He's sick. He collapsed this morning. I had to get him to the hospital." Ion's concern deepened. He had always known Mira was a strong, capable young woman, but this moment revealed just how much responsibility she carried on her shoulders. Without hesitation, he offered, "Let me help. We can take him together." They quickly got Mira's brother into a car, and Ion drove them to a nearby private hospital. He handled the admission, spoke to the doctors, and arranged everything quickly, a world away from the careful calculations and strategy he usually used in business. But here, the stakes were personal, and he realized that helping someone in need, especially someone who had touched his daughter's life, brought a fulfillment he hadn't felt in years at the hospital. Mira stayed by her brother's side, holding his hand and whispering comforting words, while Ion handled the formalities with the medical staff. Watching her, he realized that Mira's kindness extended far beyond her interactions with Hanny. She had spent her life caring for others, often at her own expense, sacrificing comfort, security, and even her own dreams to support her family. And yet she carried it all with grace, never complaining, never seeking recognition. Later, when her brother's condition stabilized, Mira finally sat down, exhausted, on a small chair in the hospital room. Ion sat across from her, unsure how to bridge the gap between their vastly different lives. For weeks, he had admired her from afar, watching the way she cared for Hanny. And now he understood that the strength he had seen in her came from a life of struggle, responsibility, and unwavering resilience. "Thank you," Mira said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion and gratitude. I didn't know what I would do without your help." Ion shook his head gently. "You've been giving so much to others for so long," he said. "It's time someone helped you back." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity that Mira hadn't expected. She looked at him, surprised, and for a moment, the barriers between them seemed to dissolve. Ion began asking gentle questions about her life, learning about the sacrifices she made to care for her younger brother, how she worked multiple jobs to support him, and how she managed to stay positive despite the challenges she faced daily. Mira spoke candidly, with a mixture of pride and vulnerability, revealing a life that had been tough but had also shaped her into the kind, compassionate woman he had come to admire. Hearing her story, Ion realized how remarkable she truly was. He had always believed that success was measured by wealth, influence, and power. But here was Mira, a young woman with far fewer resources, yet she had something far more valuable: strength, empathy, and the ability to touch the hearts of those around her. He found himself silently grateful that his daughter had encountered such a person, someone who could offer Hanny the emotional warmth he sometimes struggled to provide. As the hours passed and Mira's brother rested under medical care, Ion noticed something unexpected in himself. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like the aloof, distant businessman. He felt connected, present, and genuinely concerned. Seeing Mira handle her responsibilities with such grace made him reflect on his own role as a father. He realized that being wealthy and powerful was not enough to protect Hanny from loneliness or emotional struggles. What mattered most was presence, care, and love, qualities Mira had shown in abundance. Finally, as Mira thanked him again and prepared to leave the hospital, Ion made a quiet decision. He would do more than simply watch from the sidelines. He wanted to be part of Hanny's healing, but he also wanted to support Mira in ways that went beyond simple gestures. She had given so much to others without asking for anything in return, and he felt a responsibility, not out of obligation, but out of genuine admiration and growing affection to help her. Driving back with Hanny asleep in his arms, Ion reflected on the morning's events. He realized that life often revealed its most profound lessons in unexpected moments, in a simple hug at a cafe, in the struggles of a young woman caring for her family, and in the quiet, unspoken bonds that form when people open their hearts. Mira's courage and kindness had not only touched Hanny, but it also awakened something within him: a willingness to let go of rigid control and embrace vulnerability, connection, and care. That day, Ion understood that the small routines of morning cafe visits had transformed into something much larger. They had become a bridge between past grief and future hope, between loneliness and connection. Mira was no longer just a friendly waitress. She was someone who had proven that love and compassion could heal, nurture, and even inspire those around her. As he watched Hanny sleep peacefully in the back seat, Ion felt a quiet determination. He would ensure that Mira and her brother were safe and supported. He would cherish the bond Hanny had formed with her, and he would embrace the lesson Mira had unknowingly taught him, that real strength often lies in gentleness, and that the heart's capacity to care is more powerful than wealth, influence, or status. Little did he know, this day filled with unexpected challenges, compassion, and revelation would mark a turning point. It would be the day when his admiration for Myra deepened into respect and connection, and the journey of building a new, meaningful family truly began. Over the following weeks, the bond between Hanny and Mira grew stronger. Ion watched every small moment with quiet fascination. Hanny had begun to thrive in ways he had longed for since her mother's passing. She laughed freely, expressed her feelings without hesitation, and eagerly shared every little joy with Mira. The little girl had started to look forward to the mornings at the cafe, as if stepping into a world where she felt completely safe and loved. Ion noticed how Mira's presence transformed not just Hanny, but also himself. He had become more attentive, more patient, and surprisingly, more open. The walls he had built around his heart over years of grief and business pressure were slowly softening. He saw the world differently now. Small acts of kindness and empathy mattered more than he had realized. Watching Mira care for Hanny, he understood that love was not about perfection or material provision. It was about presence, compassion, and connection. One morning, as the three of them sat together at their usual table, Hanny suddenly looked up at Ion with wide, earnest eyes. "Papa," she said, her voice hesitant but sincere, "can Mira be my mom?" The question hung in the air, delicate and powerful, like a fragile crystal about to fall. Ion felt his chest tighten. He hadn't expected this, though perhaps he should have. Hanny's attachment to Mira had grown naturally, and it was clear that the little girl had found the maternal love she had been missing for so long. Ion looked at Mira, who was slightly taken aback, but deeply moved. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, reflecting the mixture of surprise, joy, and a gentle sadness that she could not yet fully name. In that instant, Ion realized something profound. Mira was no longer just a friend or a helpful presence in their lives. She had become essential. She had shown them warmth, patience, and love, and in doing so, had helped heal parts of their hearts that had long been broken. He took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "Hanny," he said softly, "Myra has been so kind and loving, and I can see how much you care for her. She has a very special place in our lives." Myra's hand trembled slightly as she reached for Hanny, holding her small hands with tenderness. Ion continued, his voice steadying as he spoke from the heart. "If we are all willing, maybe we can start building a new family together. One where love and care guide us, not just the past or circumstances." Mira blinked back tears and nodded slowly. She could see the sincerity in Ion's eyes, the quiet strength in his words, and the deep love he had for Hanny. She understood that this was not a fleeting gesture or a decision taken lightly. It was a promise of support, partnership, and shared care for the child they both loved dearly. The little girl, sensing the shift, clapped her hands and hugged Mira tightly. "Yes, yes," she exclaimed. Her laughter filled the cafe, a sound so pure and joyful that Ion felt an almost physical warmth in his chest. Mira hugged her back just as tightly, whispering softly, "I will always be here for you, Hanny, I promise." In that hug, years of loneliness, grief, and longing seemed to melt away, replaced by hope, connection, and the beginnings of a new life. Over the next few days, Ion made arrangements to ensure that Mira and her brother would have a safe, comfortable living situation. He offered Myra a new job, one that allowed her to continue caring for her brother while also being part of Hanny's life. Mira was hesitant at first, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden changes, but Ion reassured her. He didn't want her to feel indebted or trapped. He wanted this to be a choice made from the heart, a decision rooted in love and mutual respect. As the new routine settled in, Ion, Mira, and Hanny slowly began to build a life together. Mornings at the cafe remained their cherished ritual, but now they were more than just breakfasts. They were a symbol of healing, trust, and the love that had quietly grown between them. Hanny would chatter endlessly with Mira, and Ion would sometimes join in, sharing small jokes or stories, creating memories that filled the gaps left by loss. Hanny's attachment to Mira blossomed into something beautiful. She began seeking guidance, comfort, and reassurance from her, not just in small matters, but in big ones too. If she was nervous about school or upset about missing her mother, Mira was there, listening and responding with patience. Hanny began to show confidence and resilience, knowing she was supported by two strong, caring adults who loved her deeply. For Ion, the transformation was just as profound. He had learned that vulnerability and openness were not signs of weakness. They were paths to connection. He discovered the joy of sharing small, intimate moments, reading bedtime stories, celebrating tiny achievements, and even cooking breakfast together with Mira and Hanny. The walls he had built around his heart slowly crumbled, replaced by warmth, trust, and love. One evening, months after their first cafe visit, Ion brought Mira and Hanny to the same table where it had all begun. Hanny ran ahead, giggling, while Mira followed with a soft smile. Ion knelt beside his daughter and gently held Mira's hand. "This is the place where everything changed," he said quietly. "Where you hugged my daughter for the first time, and our lives began to heal." Mira's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy, belonging, and hope. Ayan continued, "If you're willing, I would like this to be the start of our new family, one built on love, care, and understanding. Not just for Hanny, but for all of us." Mira squeezed his hand gently, nodding. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, a hug to a lonely little girl, could lead to something so life-changing. But now, standing there with Ion and Hanny, she realized that life's most meaningful connections often came from the simplest gestures. The ones that touched hearts and healed wounds. Hanny, bouncing on her toes with excitement, hugged both of them simultaneously. "We're a family," she exclaimed, her voice bright and unreserved. In that moment, all the loneliness, grief, and uncertainty seemed to vanish. Ion, Mira, and Hanny stood together, connected not by circumstance or obligation, but by love, choice, and the shared experience of healing and hope. Over time, their life together flourished. Hanny continued to grow into a happy, confident child. Mira and Ion learned from each other, supporting and challenging one another in ways that strengthened their bond. They celebrated birthdays, small achievements, and ordinary mornings with extraordinary joy. And every time they visited the cafe where it all began, they were reminded of the simple power of kindness, compassion, and presence, the qualities that had brought them together and transformed their lives. Ion often reflected on the journey. He realized that wealth and power could never replace love, empathy, and connection. Mira had taught him that strength could be gentle and that true courage often showed up in acts of care for others. Hanny had taught them both the importance of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of family. In the end, what started as a single hug in a small cafe grew into a life full of love, trust, and happiness. Ion, Mira, and Hanny became more than just a father, a mother figure, and a daughter. They became a family, chosen and cherished, bound not by chance but by the quiet, powerful force of love that changed everything. And so, the billionaire dad, the brave young woman, and the little girl who had lost so much found something extraordinary, a family that healed, supported, and loved each other unconditionally. Their story became a testament to the fact that sometimes the most unexpected connections can lead to the most beautiful beginnings.